Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the National Jewish Assembly. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Gary Mond, I'm the chairman, and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. And we're very honored indeed to have Rabbi Leo Dee as our guest speaker. Rabbi Dee, as I'm sure many of you know, was appointed a couple of months ago by the Israeli Foreign Minister, Eli Cohen, to be Israel's Special Envoy for Social Initiatives. And I'm sure everyone knows that Rabbi Dee suffered the most horrendous personal tragedy imaginable earlier in the year when his wife Lucy and his two daughters, Maia and Rina, were murdered by Palestinian terrorists. Prior to that, Rabbi Dee had been a rabbi in England. He was between 2008 and 2011 the assistant rabbi at Hendon United Synagogue. And between 2011 and 2014, he was the senior rabbi at Radlett United Synagogue. So it's now my great pleasure to ask Rabbi Dee to address us. And he'll speak for about 20 minutes. And then after that, I will throw it open for questions. Rabbi Dee.
Okay, thank you. And people are welcome to type any questions in the chat, which I have open. So if I notice anything, I'm happy to answer as we go along. I thought I'd talk about something slightly different to my usual topics. I hope that it will be interesting and relevant. But I know that tonight is the anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. So I just wanted to say my uncle Johnny Emanuel was a journalist for the Jerusalem Post for many years, and he wrote a book about the Jews and basically the Balfour Declaration. The British and the Balfour Declaration, and just to summarize it in literally a minute or two, he said that the fascination with Jews starts with Henry VIII, and when he wanted to get an annulment of his marriage with Catherine of Aragon, she was actually the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, who were the king and queen of Spain, who were responsible for the Inquisition and throwing out the Jews. The issue was that the Pope at the time was under the Spanish king, and basically he was the father of Catherine. So because of that connection, he wasn't willing to do anything to that marriage. And that was why Henry then brought in Jews, as we know, from Holland, or in order to teach Mosaic law about it was actually Yibum, levirate marriage and divorce. And so the movement towards Protestantism in Britain under Henry VIII came because of that. And what was interesting was that when he died, so Mary, Queen of Scots, was a Catholic. So it swung that way. And then the next king was a Protestant. The next one was Catholic. And it oscillated for about 100 years until we got to Charles I, who was a Catholic. And then Cromwell killed him. And what was interesting was that Cromwell had Bible pamphlets printed for his army. And if you looked at the Bible pamphlets that he printed, there were 100 verses, of which I think 97 were from the Old Testament and 3 were from the New Testament. And all the 3 that were from the New Testament were actually quotes from the Old Testament, like love your neighbor as yourself. So basically, Cromwell and Henry VIII Judaized Christianity in Britain, created Protestantism as we know it, and basically that was the fascination with the Old Testament, and therefore with Jews, and therefore with Israel, and that's how Balfour came into creation. And the connection, I guess, with me is a bit tenuous, but I'll tell you my connection. That when this tragedy happened to my family, the British Foreign Office made a declaration, which was 3 British Israeli women were killed, and we call upon all parties to de-escalate tensions. To which Melanie Phillips immediately wrote an article saying, there are 3 problems with this statement. Number 1, they weren't killed, they were brutally murdered. And number 2, it wasn't good enough they were British. They were only British Israeli qualified. So number three, we asked all parties to de-escalate tensions. Presumably that includes the dead 3 women. That was what she wrote. So when I got a call from the consul, British consul, a week or so after the Shiva, and he said, I've come to console you. I said, well, you're the consul, so that's presumably what you do, which he didn't sort of click. But anyway, the consul said, I've called to console. I said, stop there. I said, I will not take any consolation from the British. I will not speak to you after that statement from the Foreign Office, which was so disgusting that, I said what Melanie Phillips has said about it. So I said, unless I get an apology, a letter from Rishi Sunak or from James Cleverly, forthright, I said I'll be speaking to the press about my feelings. Anyway, the next morning I get a letter sent to me by the British ambassador, Neil Wigan, and this is the letter from James Cleverly, and it says, I quote a part of it, there can be no justification for such senseless and abhorrent violence, and I unequivocally condemn this act of terrorism. Ukraine remains steadfast in our commitment to work with the Israel authorities and all parties in the region, blah, 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 blah. So I then named this the Cleverly Declaration after the Balfour Declaration. And that's how it was known for the 24 hours after it was written. So that was my connection with the Balfour Declaration. But I think that, thank God, that letter was written, and I think James Cleverly has shown himself not only in that letter but also in his subsequent behavior to Israel the last month, a true friend of Israel, a true enemy of terror, and a supporter of good over evil. So and I think Rishi Sunak as well. So I think that they're very much in the flavor of the Balfour Declaration. I think that we're seeing history being written in front of our eyes at the moment. I guess that to talking about the current situation in Israel, it's not by chance that it happened on Simchat Torah. I happened to be at the early service in my synagogue. So when the first siren went off on Simchat Torah this year, we just completed reading the first part of Genesis, of Bereshit, and the creation of the world. And basically, we're in a new world. I mean, I think most people in Israel feel that, and maybe you feel that as well, that our lives have changed. I mean, almost disconnected to how they were 4 weeks ago. But if you remember what you were doing 4 weeks ago and what you thought about Israel and what people thought about Israel 4 weeks ago and what they think now, and what's going on in the streets of London, Gary mentioned that you're expecting 1 million Palestinians, lovers, to be walking down the streets of London this week, perhaps. We're living in a different existence, and the Torah says, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Well, the Sunday morning there was a new light shining on Zion. I think that there was a light on good and a light on evil, and people who were evil started marching down the streets celebrating this terrible act. And everybody else was able to see them. So they very kindly put their head above the parapet to identify themselves, which I think is probably very healthy. So if there are 1 million people walking on Shabbat, then hopefully there'll be cameramen out there recording who these people are for the future security of the nation. But things changed dramatically. I mean, we saw Biden make a speech a couple of days after this happened. I'm not a Democrat, but I have seen Biden try and make speeches in the past, and often he didn't make it up to the platform without tripping over. And this particular speech was absolutely word perfect, with huge amounts of emotion and meaning and depth and power. And I can only say that to me, it seemed that God himself was speaking through the lips of Joe Biden. And there is a verse, of course, in Ecclesiastes in Kohelet, which says, Lev HaMelech B'yad Hashem, the heart of the king is in the hands of God, and the Rambam explains that to mean that even though everybody has free choice, there is an exception to the rule of free choice, which is in the case of kings, because God wants to bring redemption to the world in a particular time. And one of the means which he has at his disposal is to influence the words of and the actions of kings. And it seemed to me that that was exactly what was going on there. And then we saw other changes, of course, in Israel. They called up the Air Force reservists on the Sunday, and they expected 60% to turn up based on the number of people who had been refusing up until then to come. And they got 120% turnout, because not only the 40% who were refusing turned up, but another 20% of people came along and said, why didn't you call us too? So that's where we are in Israel. Incredible feeling of unity. I'm sure you're seeing as much as I am, more perhaps of the videos coming from the bases. There's a tremendous sense of purpose, and everybody understands what needs to be done. And it really is incredible. And I think, it's very sad that it took such a terrible attack to achieve this. But the fact that we're here is really quite a remarkable place to be. And we know all the different messages. I think they're quite important. And we've all heard them, but they're worth repeating. I mean, the number of things that are happening now are quite remarkable. The amount of anti-Semitism that suddenly has appeared, which clearly was there all the time. I think we knew it was there all the time, but it never really identified itself in the way that it is at the moment on campuses around the world. I mean, just scenes that seem to come out of pogroms in Russia from 100 years ago, or from the Holocaust. So I think if there's ever been a reason to be supportive of Israel, to understand why we need the state of Israel, it is now. And also would urge everyone, if you're really Zionist, to be considering coming to move here. Please God, it will be even safer than it's ever been before within a month or two's time. And then I think it will be really the place to be. Well, it's already the place to be, but it will be even more so. I had a trip to Vienna a couple of weeks ago with the Foreign Office. I just wanted to say a couple of words about that. Then maybe we can lead on to some questions. I went to the Viennese Parliament, and I spoke to some politicians there, and had an hour to discuss with them about the situation in Israel. And one of the things I said was that what's happening in Israel is just a microcosm of what's happening in Europe, and that we are the front line effectively for global jihad, fighting global jihad. And it's coming to a screen near you. And at this point, one of the lady MPs who's in the ruling coalition put up her hand, and I said, yes. She asked the question. She said, don't you think it's too late for Europe? That was what she said. Don't you think, with complete seriousness, don't you think it's too late for Europe? And my answer was, if you're prepared to stand up, and the leaders of this country and of Europe are prepared to stand up and to say that there is good and there is evil, and that certain things are unacceptable, I said, then there's a chance. I said, but if we continue in this postmodern world where everything is acceptable, your truth is one truth, and their truth is their truth, and everyone's truth is a truth, then basically we're all dead. So that was the answer to that. That is, I think, a prevailing opinion. I think that if you look at what's happening in global politics, I don't know if you want my opinion on this, but it's my opinion. If you look at what's happening in global politics, if you're Parev, if you don't really, you sort of, you look at what's going on, and you may not approve of it, but you actually don't have an alternative set of values. You're sort of pretty, just passive in terms of morality. You believe everyone's right to believe in whatever they want to believe in, and everyone's set of morals is relative. And as long as they don't affect you too much, then you're happy to continue, which seems to be the Western approach. then you're wide open to attack from these evil ideologies. I think that the unique thing about the Jewish people is that we have a set of values which are written in a book, and we believe they're eternal. And we live by them to a greater or lesser extent, depending on who you are. But we do believe there is something there. And what's interesting is in this war that you see these people fighting, risking their lives, religious, not religious. They understand there's something valuable that they're fighting for. It's not just they're fighting against something. And it's interesting. It's not about the enemy at all. It's more about our values and making sure that we can continue living in this beautiful country, living with our beautiful values, living with our, bringing up our kids in the way that we want to bring them up. That's what people are fighting for. It's the positive. And I think that, unfortunately, in secular societies, whilst they can possibly see the negativity of the other cultures, they don't necessarily have a strong culture of their own, which they want to fight for and they want to defend. And therefore, the fact that the front line of this battle is in Israel is not by chance. It's because we actually have something that we feel so positive about. I think that one of the outcomes of this may be that people around the world will say, actually, a return to religious values and actually a passion for those values and a study of those values is very important, because it's not enough just to be passive and to accept that everybody's truth is everyone's truth. It's actually important to live by some sort of values, whatever they happen to be, that you believe in. And I think that is a gift of the Jewish people. I want to just a couple of minutes and I'll take questions. Gary was saying that that you've been very active organizing the BBC demonstration, I think, which is amazing. I'm sure you're all doing many different things for the war effort in Israel, but I really think that one of the things that people should be doing outside of Israel, particularly English speakers, is creating messaging for this war effort, that this war is actually being fought on two fronts. And we have the brave Israeli soldiers risking their lives on the borders of Gaza and of Lebanon. But there's an equally important battle, as you're aware, in the media. And in the past, we've always lost that battle. This time, I think, we have a chance of winning it. But the way that it's running is very interesting. If you observe, the messages are changing slightly each week. And, it started off with Hamas's ISIS, and then we've got, the different messaging about free Palestine means genocide. And now, of course, got the messaging of the hostages and so forth. But in order to maintain the momentum of which is basically the right for us to continue fighting this evil, which we know we have to continue until the end, we need to have this sort of generation of ideas. And I think I would characterize it as a sort of global brainstorming session, that what's happening is that people are spreading ideas about, how to explain what's going on, because the West is baffled. Okay. I mean, as I understand it, if you're a regular Englishman or Frenchman or German, this is just another war, just another battle. It's Ukraine versus Russia, it's Houthi versus Tutsi, it's the Syrian civil war. It's just another war. So let's go back to football. But we understand that there's something greater going on here. We're actually the front line of global jihad, and this is just a microcosm of what's going on elsewhere. And that people need to wake up and smell the roses before it's too late for them. But that message is not getting across. And therefore, in order to make sure that it is getting across a bit better and whatever, the more English speakers, that means you, who can contribute your ideas into this means making videos. It's not very difficult nowadays on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or whatever technology. Those of you who feel you're too old, get your children or grandchildren to do it for you, but tell them the messages, work with them to do it. But honestly, the idea of Hamas is ISIS, which Bibi said on the second day of this conflict, probably came from a 15-year-old girl in in Hendon or something who came up with this idea. Nobody quite knows. But for sure, a lot of these other ideas are just circulating around, and somebody's coming up with it, and somebody else picks up on it, and then make it slightly better, and so forth. It goes around and gets refined, and eventually comes out of Bibi's mouth. So I think that it's very, very important that every single one of us is generating 1-2 of these different ideas per week, and that's something which you absolutely can do and can make a massive impact on this war. So it's absolutely as important as fighting with a gun on the front. It's much safer, but actually just as important in terms of winning this war. So that would be my request to you, is to spend some time. If you're spending time today consuming media, then nowadays you should be the people who are also creating the media. And I think with the Jewish people and those who support us creating these messages, we can win this battle, because we are on the side of right. But sometimes even the right and even the truth has to be expressed in language that other people can understand, and that's a big challenge. So.
Thank you ever so much, Rabbi Dee. Now, those who want to ask questions, please could you raise your virtual hands? You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand box. If you could click on that, if you want to actually raise your hand, that would be great. I'm going to kick off by asking a couple of questions myself, and then I'll throw it open to everyone else. My first question is that I was very fearful about there being two different objectives for Israel. One, the complete and utter eradication of Hamas, and two, achieving freedom for the hostages. And my fear has been that at some point those two objectives might conflict with each other. Those who believe that freedom for the hostages is the most important thing of all might be pushing for a deal with the terrorists, like freeing vast numbers of prisoners. That doesn't seem to have happened yet, and I'm very glad it hasn't happened. And I'd just like your comments on this potential split, as it were, between those who believe in eradicating Hamas first and foremost, and those who believe in freeing the hostages first and foremost.
Yeah, just as we read Parshat Lech Lecha, which contains the war of Abraham with the 4 and 5 kings, and the saving of Lot, the hostage, and the message of Lech Lecha is there are two reasons to go to war, which are number one, to destroy evil, number two, to rescue hostages. Bibi made an announcement last week saying there are two reasons for this war. Number one is to destroy evil, and number two, listen to his words, to try to recover the hostages. So that's what he said, to try to. So I think, in his words, it was very clear what the priority was. And in terms of priorities, I've met a number of the hostage families, and I mean they're incredible. I find all the Jewish people, all Israelis, incredible people. But I mean, the truth is, every single one of us, if God forbid this happened to us, we would be saying that the most important thing is to release the hostages. So it's totally understandable. And personally, I wouldn't want to be the person making the decision. So I think it's a little bit of sort of justice to Bibi, who squandered, who insisted on not having a successor and a sort of, an obvious successor or equal in his cabinet. And now all the decision for what happens next has fallen on his shoulders. So I think that is, the quid pro quo of how he has managed the government in the past, that he has this on his conscience and he has to make that decision. I'm personally glad that I wouldn't have to be in that situation. I'm sure most of us would agree.
I'm going to take questions in groups of 3. So I'm going to ask the 3 questioners to make their question. Then I'll go back to Rabbi Dee to answer. And then I'll ask the next group of 3. So the first group of 3 I see are Les Bloom, Nigel Seidler, and Jonathan Taylor. Les. Could you unmute,
Oh,
please?
okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for giving me a first crack. Anyway, I just want to say some things.
Can we make sure we ask
All right,
questions?
dead quick. I'll go quick. Okay. Firstly, what the whole of the media seems to be forgetting, people are calling for a ceasefire, but the first thing I'd like to say is there was a ceasefire a month ago, right? So people are calling for a ceasefire. It's bizarre. There was a ceasefire a month ago, so now they want another one. Well, what point is there having a ceasefire if you're going to get monsters coming across the border and decapitating babies? I mean, it doesn't make sense. The other thing I wanted to say is about the ceasefire is, personally, I don't know if everyone would agree with me, but I think there could be another ceasefire if every single one of those hostages was returned back to where they came from. That's my personal view. The third thing I wanted to say is free Palestine. People are going around saying free Palestine. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's a contradiction in terms. I mean, what they're saying is, let's make what they call Palestine into Gaza, or let's make what they call Palestine into Syria or Lebanon or Iran. How can you have a free Palestine if it's just going to be Gaza? It doesn't make sense. And the final thing I wanted to say is, I agree with what you were saying before about people getting involved with the media. I would appeal to every single person listening to me now. Please try and get, I don't know if I don't use social media at all, so I don't know. But if you use social media or your family does, get them to use it as much as possible, and phone into like radio shows, LBC and stuff like that, because I fear that Israel is maybe it may be winning the war militarily, but it's losing the hearts of the in-betweeners, or whatever you want to call them.
Yes, thank you very much.
Does that make sense? All right, finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigel Seidler.
So my question is, we've seen Jewish groups, and I'm not going to say who, because we all know who've been calling for ceasefires, seem to support and sympathize with Hamas, who are obviously a terrorist organization. Unfortunately, you yourself has been personally affected by terrorism. What would you say to a Jewish person who does sympathize with Hamas and sympathizes with the actions and called Israel an occupation when it's not? We've not occupied Gaza since 2005. And these are the people who were King's Cross this morning, the people protesting outside Keir Starmer's speech at Chatham House. How do we unite people? Because yes, 90% of the Jews are united, but we still have 10% who seem distant from everyone else.
My answer to that, sadly, is based on the Rambam. The Rambam has a very small number of Jews who are considered basically reasons why you would not be considered Jewish, and for really extreme behaviors. And one of them is somebody who cuts himself off from the Jewish destiny and supporting the Jewish people in times of trouble. And I would say these people are, not Jewish in the same way as Notori Carter are not Jewish. When you behave in that sort of extreme way that is against the interest of the Jewish people, you've disassociated. You have disassociated yourself from the pain and suffering of the Jewish people. You've basically opted out. So they're not Jewish. They can call themselves Jewish. They can wear a tallis, whatever, but they're not part of our people anymore. So it's sad. But I'm not sure they're recoverable.
Okay, if I ask Jonathan Taylor to ask his question, and then
Gary,
you can answer
sorry.
Les and Jonathan.
Gary,
yes?
Sorry. Can you please read your messages?
Yeah.
Oh. Gary, I'm talking to Gary, that's all.
Okay. Right, well, Jonathan, would you ask your question while I'm reading my message?
Yes, I'm we're very honored to have you to talk to us, and thank you very much for your remarks. Now, this morning, Tzipi Hotovely, the ambassador, spoke on Israeli TV, and they asked her some challenging questions like what's happening in London or Britain with all these major demonstrations. We get the impression that we're losing the battle for public opinion, and we need that very much in Britain. What do you say to that? So she very quickly said that the main thing is we have the government and the opposition on our side, which is very, very important. It's less important the demonstrations. Now, how would you fight the rest of the issues that we have as a Jewish public to deal with the police, to deal with the media, and to deal with the street, who are definitely not on the side of Israel, as much as the government are? We're very thankful for that. We have a lot of problems from day to day to try to combat all these streams which are running against our interests in Britain today.
Very good. Your question is very good. I think I would separate, for example, the street to the police. I think that the police issue is really quite concerning. Particularly, I saw a video of a policeman removing posters of the hostages, which I thought was extremely distasteful. And I think the Muslim police commissioner was trying to explain, that he was sorry about or whatever. And I think that there's obviously some politics going on there. And I think that needs to be sorted out, presumably by Sue Braverman or whatever. And as quickly as possible, they need to get some legislation through as to what the police can do, what they can't do, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I would hope that there are lawyers working on that, in real time to get that sort of legislation through very quickly, to make sure that the police have the powers to, and also the requirement to act, swiftly. As far as the street's concerned, and as I say, we were talking earlier that maybe there are 1 million people could turn up, and it probably won't, but let's say if there was 1 million people turned up in the street, I wouldn't worry too much about that public opinion, because remember there were 60, 70 million people in England. That's 1 million of them. You're not going to sway any one of those people, because those are the extremists. They're the people who are immoral and want to basically see the destruction of Jews. So they're not the people. They're not the undecideds by definition. If they're marching down the street, they're very much decideds. And actually, I think that the way they behave and the messages they have actually scare the undecideds a lot. So they're probably doing us a favor by identifying themselves as the opposition to Israel. And when people see them, they're scared of them, and they will think twice about supporting them. So I think that they're not doing their cause a good deal, thank God. And I think despite their numbers, I wouldn't be too afraid of it. I have to say, and I'm not wishing it in any way, but I think that it's a foregone conclusion that what will happen in the next week, 2 or 3, is there will likely be more and more attacks by these people on property, hopefully not on people, but it could easily move into terror, and not just against Jews, but against people in general, and obviously the police. And I think that, as it spirals out of control, I think that will also push the majority of British people onto the side of Israel. So I think that actually these people probably not doing themselves a great favor, and I wouldn't worry about the image so much, or about the impression they make. But I would worry about your own safety and security if you happen to be anywhere near one of these marches.
Okay, the next speakers, I'm going to ask the next three to ask their questions, and then Rabbi Lee will respond. Basil Mann, Sephora Lax, Nigel Blumenthal. Basil, you're on mute, Basil. Basil, you're still on mute. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, you can switch your video on as well.
Can you switch your camera on, please? It will be nice if we can see you.
I'm not sure. But anyway.
Okay, ask your question, Basil.
The first question is, it's very interesting, and you've talked about the Balfour Declaration. Now, I went to Whittingham College, a Jewish boarding school in Brighton, and it was named by Jacob Halevi, and it was called Whittingham because of the Declaration, and it was that influence that made me make an awful lot, as much as I could, to a contribution to Jewish life. And so it was schooling that started me off in a Jewish way of life. And I was always appreciative of Jacob Halevi in those days. And my question is, also that's a statement, but I'm so sad to watch the news. I can't watch it much longer. I feel that where are we going? The British people are not with us. They're not with us. We're fighting a battle on our own all the time. And it's been going on ever since the Holocaust and everything else. And I'm very, very sad at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Basil. Zipporah Lax. If you could put your camera on, that would be very nice. And Zipporah.
Hi, I'm so sorry I can't put my camera on, but thank you. And Rabbi Dee, it's a privilege to hear you speak, and I hope that you and your family are doing as well as can be. From what I've seen, there's been an incredible uptake in religious belief and practice in Israel and around the world. But I'm sure there are those among us who have found this to be a real challenge to their relationship with Hashem. I'm wondering if you might be able to share, in addition to what you've already shared, any words of chizuk, of spiritual encouragement. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Nigel Blumenthal, do you want to ask your question? Then I'll ask Rabbi Dee to respond.
I will do that if you like. Sure. As Jews, we always look at behavior rather than feelings. Yom Kippur is obviously the time of year when we look at our past behaviors and we resolve to do better in the future. And we seem to be the only people in the world who tend to do that. US politicians always talk about a peace process. And my question really is, everyone's talking about the peace process, but who's the process with? Hamas have made it very clear that that as far as they're concerned, the only peace will come when all the Jews are dead.
Okay.
I'm calling here from Canada. We have a slightly different media approach from the one in the UK. We're a little bit better off here. But I really feel, watching UK media, that our previous one of the previous questioners who said that they think the UK is losing the battle, I think he's correct.
Okay, I think okay. So to start with Nigel's question, I would say that there does not need to be a peace. There should not be a peace process, but there should be a shalom process. And I differentiate between the two because, in the words of Rabbi Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, he said the word peace comes from the Latin pax, which means a ceasefire, effectively, no fighting. And the word shalom comes from the Hebrew shlemut, which means completion. And the two are very different. We've had peace with Gaza every time we have a ceasefire, and until the next flare-up, and then there's a war, and then we have peace again. Shalom is where you actually deal with the underlying causes, and you create a system where people can live together in harmony on an ongoing basis. And what we're engaged in at the moment through this war is a shalom process, which is getting rid of the greatest barrier to shalom, which is Hamas. And what will come out of it is a structure that will be much more able to lead to ongoing shalom. And so I think we're in a shalom process, and perhaps that's part of what people have to understand, that we don't, peace is not what we're aiming for here. We're aiming for shalom. As far as I think it was Zipporah who asked the question about questions of faith at times of tragedy. So I'll tell you something that one of my messages, which I give people at the moment, is that there are two ways to deal with tragedy in our tradition. Number one is Job. And Job basically sits at home and is visited by his friends, and they philosophize for 42 chapters of what is really quite difficult reading. Is Job good? Is Job bad? Did he deserve it? Did he not deserve it? Does God care? Does God not care? And every possible combination of the above. And at the end, they come to no conclusion. Thank God, God grants Job a few happinesses, and we can draw to a close. Otherwise, it would go on for another 42 chapters, and it would be very painful. I don't think that is a traditional Jewish approach to tragedy. The traditional approach is more given by Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva lost 24,000 students in 7 weeks to the Bar Kokhba rebellions. They were massacred by Roman soldiers. And he started from scratch with 5 new students, who then became the main rabbis of the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva famously laughs when he sees a fox running across the destroyed Second Temple, and he's asked why, and he says because there were 2 prophecies: one that it would be destroyed, another that it would get rebuilt. And until I saw it destroyed, I didn't believe it would be rebuilt. Now I've seen it destroyed, I believe it's been rebuilt, and therefore I'm laughing in joy that the Third Temple will get rebuilt. And then he laughs. Then when he's being put to death by the Romans, he shouts out Shema Yisrael Eloheinu Echad, which is like a sign of optimism. So he's full of optimism, even at the worst moments, when he's being killed, when his students are being killed, when the whole Jewish people have been destroyed. How does he do it? And I think it's because he looks into Jewish history and he sees that we were slaves for 80 years in Egypt. And when we came out, after 7 weeks, we ended up collecting the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. He probably did not know at that point that we would be in German and Polish death camps for 6 years. And after 3 years, we came out and we established the State of Israel. For 6 days, the world thought that there was going to be a second Holocaust, and Israelis were digging graves all over Israel. And at the end of 6 days, we recaptured the Kotel, Jerusalem, and Yehuda v'Shomron. So, the history of the Jewish people has always been tragedy followed by redemption, step towards redemption. This tragedy is greater than Yom Kippur War. A lot of people are calling it the Second War of Independence. I think it's on a scale, particularly if Iran and Hezbollah get involved tomorrow or soon, it's a greater scale than anything we've seen before. And therefore, one could expect a redemption which is greater than anything we've seen before. I think that on our list is building the Third Temple, so we could hope for that speedily, in the next year or two. So I think that's where, I think that somehow tragedy can give you hope. And one of the strange things about tragedy, and I can speak personally about this, is that when you go through a really terrible tragedy, one thing for sure: tomorrow will be a better day. And whilst you're sad about the tragedy and you live with that sadness, you also have a happiness and a sort of a hope. And your hope is often greater than other people's hope, because you know that things have to be better tomorrow, whereas they perhaps don't. So I think that that's something which God's put into creation that helps you through these difficult times.
Okay, 3 more speakers: Esther Ebbing, Mervyn Smith, and Rachel Vincent. Esther.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much, Rabbi Dee. I feel so honoured to be here. I raced all the way back from work to be able to hear you. I was wondering about combating the anti-Semitism, like the propaganda, whatever you want to call it, on the media, via our own, like, showing the truth, through TikTok and different things like that. Because when I try not to look at the BBC News, but when I do, I think of it like as they're not being logical. It doesn't seem logical to me. And therefore, I wonder if the people who believe it are anyway anti-Semitic, and they're just allowing themselves to believe that. It's like a blood libel. So, let's believe it, because any thinking person will think about, what can happen in Islamic religion and extremism, even things like how they treat their wives, a lot of them, and things like that. It's not so simple. People ask a lot of Western people here, non-Jewish people, would they want to convert to Islam? They would say no, but yet they believe what's happening on the media, that we're somehow the aggressor. So that's why I was wondering, can we combat it with the truth? Because perhaps there's a lot of people who don't believe it. They might not be so vocal. And those who do, could we even change their minds? Like, I know there's the in-between people, but I'm wondering, is there an in-between?
Okay, excellent question. I don't know what the answer is, but I'll tell you what came to mind. First of all, as I say, we don't have to convert everybody. The anti-Semites are going to hate us anyway. And they're not the people we're trying to convince. Though you're right, the BBC is disappointing because they do potentially speak to a large audience. But I think that just because people watch BBC doesn't mean they agree with the BBC. Obviously, they might be influenced by them. The issue is that it's entertaining to be anti-Semitic, and particularly when you get away with it. It is, for some reason, something which actually gives lots of people a lot of enjoyment. So it doesn't mean that people actually necessarily agree with it, but they're entertained by it. I always say, I think what you were saying, if you're walking down a dark alleyway at night, if you ask a regular Englishman, he's walking down an alleyway at night, he sees someone coming towards him with a kafir or somebody with a black hat, who's he more scared of? He'd be more scared of the guy with the kafir. I think that's true for pretty much everyone. But at the same time, he's watching BBC that's saying that this guy with the black hat is the guy who's guilty of, of squandering the human rights of these Arabs. And one interesting point that was made about an American guy who was debating at Oxford University. I can't remember who it was, his name, but he said that every war in the world is between a free country and a non-free country, or between two non-free countries. And every war in the world where it's between a free country and a non-free country, it's the non-free country is considered to be the aggressor and the free country is considered to be the victim, such as Russia and Ukraine, right, etc. Right. So that's the rule of warfare. Everybody agrees, except on one occasion when it comes to Israel, when Israel is the free country, we're fighting against every single Arab country which are not free. And we're the aggressor, and they're not. So it's fascinating. I would refer you to I'd recommend to everybody. There's a very good shir by Y.Y. Jacobson, which I listened to. It's on Spotify. It's under his Emunah Shirim, and it's number 20 on his Emunah Shirim. And in it, he discusses anti-Semitism. And I'll tell you very briefly what he says. He basically says, you have to listen to it because he says it beautifully and in great detail. He says that anti-Semitism fulfills a need for a certain type of people. He said people who are immoral, people are living a life which is immoral, whatever it is. In every generation, it's a different type of immorality which they're dealing with. They look at the Jewish people as the witnesses, as really as the J witnesses, right? Because we're the people who saw God at Mount Sinai, and that's written in all their books, right? So it's not just because we say it, because actually their books say it. And they see us as sort of slightly judgmental. They feel that we're judgmental. I mean, I found that as a rabbi, that it's like a sort of a heightened level of fear of judgmentalism, that when your community look at you, you're even greater sort of witness of God or something, and then they feel even more antagonism to you as the rabbi because you somehow represent all the things that they don't want to do. But for the anti-Semites, it's worse. They look at us as Jews, and even if we're not religious, and say, we're judging them, and they know they're wrong. So there are two ways to deal with that. Historically, and actually, I've just plugged my book, Transforming the World. That in the book I talk about how Jews influenced the world over the last 2,000 years, and people changed. People, 3,500 years probably. But if you look at all the greatest innovations, social innovations that came into the West, they came from us, from the Torah. They came from, and they emulated us. Now they didn't like us, but probably a lot of the time, and maybe even persecuted us. But eventually they copied us. So we had Shabbat. They brought in Shabbat. We had a synagogue, so they made a church and a mosque. We invented, the concept of a wedding, white dress, and a ring, and all this sort of stuff. So they had that as well. They thought that's a good idea as well. We'll have like one-on-one and a ceremony or whatever. So all the things which are family and community and life and human rights come really from our tradition. I talk about it in the book. And so that's one way. But there's a second way. If people don't want to emulate us, then the other option is to kill us. If they can wipe us out completely off the planet, then they can continue doing their evil things and they'll get away with it. And so what you find is, interestingly, that who actually tried to exterminate us over the past few thousand years? The Babylonians, because they wanted to take over the world, and we were standing in the way. The Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, obviously, the Crusaders, the Hitler, and now global jihad, right? So any organization that wants to take over the world with their evil and sort of very monolithic culture looks to the Jews and says, we need to get rid of them. We need to get rid of them because they're obviously not planning to come towards us in any way. So there's no other option. If they're not planning to adopt us, they have to destroy us. So this is the latest challenge there.
Thank you. Mervyn Smith. Mervyn, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Mervyn. You're still on mute.
Okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yes, Mervyn.
Thank you. I'm furious with the media. I'm furious with the press. They've taken no opportunities to be able to throw out the information that would give some background to where we are just now. The circumstances prevailed in 2005 when Hamas first started and took over, and their means of taking over, I remember the pictures where they threw down the previous leaders of the Palestinians from the rooftops, from their rooftops. That would have given some basis of knowledge to the idiots that prevail presently within the British system. Second point that I'd appreciate your comments on, it enthuses me with the second Sedra. And I haven't got the number, but it's, I think, about the third paragraph, where it makes the state that the worst thing that can happen is Hamas.
Okay.
And that I found quite fascinating, how that came about, and you might be able to enhance my knowledge.
Okay.
Please.
Rabbi Dee, would you like to answer? Thank you.
Yeah. So that's interesting. You're right. In Parshat Noach, so the second Parsha, it says the world was filled with violence, and the world for violence is Hamas. But what's interesting is that the traditional translation into Aramaic, which is called onkelos, translates it as kidnapping. So he translates the word Hamas to mean kidnapping. That was apparently is a more accurate translation of Hamas than violence. Although elsewhere the word Hamas does refer to violence, and in one place in the Torah, it actually means lying, because there's a term which is an ed Hamas, which means a lying witness. So the word Hamas can translate to violence, kidnapping, and lying, which basically, I think, describes our enemy pretty accurately. So that's someone. Number two, in terms of how angry we are with the media, I would say, I wouldn't be so angry. As far as Israel is concerned, I mean, maybe from an English perspective, that's valid. But as far as Israel is concerned, Israel is going to deal with this no matter what, right? Whether we have the support of everyone or not. So whilst we're worried about getting public support on our side, we're still going to continue this battle. Obviously, though, it would be beneficial if we could carry public opinion with us. But really, who's losing out are the British, because this global jihad that we'll be fighting and eliminating from our borders, I think other countries need to eliminate from their borders, to the extent that they get swayed by BBCs of this world and other publications not to do it. They'll be taken over by global jihad, and then you'll be under Sharia law in 20 years' time. So it's what Richard Landis, in his book, Can the Whole World Be Wrong?, describes, I think, as suicidal journalism, in the sense that CNNs and the BBCs of this world have been misreporting the situation for the last 20, 30 years. They've been portraying the terrorists as freedom fighters, portraying Israel as the enemy, and all they've really achieved is an increased number of these type of immigrants into their countries, which are dangerous because they haven't really identified them as dangerous. And they've created a really suicidal situation for their own countries. And it's very sad, but people are not prepared to admit the truth, then they do put their lives in peril.
Okay, Rachel Vincent, could you come off mute, please? Great.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Just a few things. I was at a meeting today with the JLC, the Jewish Leadership Council and Lead, and they basically were talking about trauma in the workplace. I don't know if anyone's been at that meeting, which is a bit scary, you know, especially when it comes to obviously the conflict. Some feel isolated in the workplace, can't talk to anyone. It's a taboo. It's insensitive. I'm just letting you know what been said now. I was at another meeting today with the Lib Dems, and I don't know if anyone knows Layla Moran. She's the first British Palestinian MP in the UK. She also works with the Lib Dems Friends of Israel as well. I was listening to her, and she wants to eradicate Hamas. That's the first thing she said. That would be, that's the first step that should be done. Secondly, she said, must get rid of Netanyahu because he's more right wing, and he's the coalition party. I'm just telling you briefly what other what's happening in politically speaking. Now, what I want to add here is...
please, quickly, we've got quite a few others who want to ask questions, Rachel. Okay. So very quick.
I have to say, all these demonstrations, especially amongst the young youths, the way I see it, it's become a trend. I don't even think they know what they're doing. They just follow each other. That's what I think. It's become like a fashion. Finally, somebody mentioned the Frummers, who are anti-Israel, if you like. They're the Neutral Carter. They're based in Manchester, and they always there with the Palestinian scarf, and they believe there's no Israel until Mashiach comes. That's their belief. That's why they're so anti-Israel at the moment. But when you look at them visually, anyone non-Jewish person or even a Jewish person look at them and think, oh my God, even the Jewish people are anti-Israel or anti-Jewish.
Okay, Rabbi Dee, that's Rabbi Dee, would like to answer.
Can I say something?
No, we've got a few minutes left.
Did you look in the chat room? There are 10:40.
I see messages. I'm giving people a chance. Leo Dee, Rabbi Dee, would you like to answer?
Yeah, but I don't want people to miss 10:40 tonight. Question time, BBC One.
We all know that.
Okay.
Can you let
Thank you.
Rabbi Dee answer?
I can't remember what I was going to say. I can't do it. Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say. So
should I move on to the next question then?
Yeah.
Okay, Evelyn Guggenheim. Evelyn?
Yes.
Are you there? Could you ask your question, please?
Okay, thank you. Thank you first very much for your Jewish and full of hope point of view, which is very meaningful and needed by this time. And I wanted to ask you something about what Hamas said. They said they don't have to care about Palestinians. This is the job of United Nations and Israel. This is one. And the other one is about the Egyptians, who said they prefer to sacrifice millions of lives instead of having one Palestinian in Egypt. What do you think of that?
Yes, I mean, I think that very simply, if you draw a map of the Middle East and you color code it as to free or not free, according to Freedom House, which is the world globally accepted measure of freedom scores of human rights, there's only one green dot, which is Israel, and the rest of it's red. Every Arab country, well, let's put it this way, no Arab country is free. No Arab country has human rights. No Arab country cares about its citizens. That includes Gaza, it includes Palestinian Authority, it includes Syria and Libya and Morocco and Saudi and Iran and Iraq, and every single one of these countries has no human rights. They do not care about their people. And I imagine the people care about themselves, but they seem to support something, like in Gaza, they appear to support these governments. There is a theory that once it's overthrown, the Gazan people will publicly state that they are happy that they're now free of it. But whilst it's in power, it is so totalitarian that they're so scared they can't actually say that. But I don't know if you saw today, there was a bit of hope. There was a woman whose house had been destroyed by Israel, and she was screaming out about the Hamas dogs, and she was being silenced on this video by her neighbors. But it was caught on camera that she was calling them Hamas dogs when the Israelis destroyed her house. So I think that's the truth of the matter. And yeah.
Have we got 10 more minutes? Is that okay, Rabbi Dee?
Sure.
10 more minutes. Okay, Marion Threlfall and then Zoe Goodman. Marion.
Just a very quick one. The demonstrations, they all have slogans and chants. We have Black Lives Matter. We've got from the river to the sea, for the ones who support Palestinians. What do you suggest that we could have as a good short chant in favour of Israel?
Right. Well, at the moment, they've got Bring Them Home.
Yes.
Which I have to say, I've said to a few of my rabbinical friends in America, is actually, I hear God screaming, bring them home to the Jews who live outside of Israel. So that's my personal feeling, is that it's for, everything is for a reason, and obviously we do want to bring the hostages home as well, but I think we want to bring you home as well. What should be the slogan? That's a very good question. I don't know. Maybe we do need a slogan, something which would bring everyone together. That's an excellent idea, and I think something you could work on.
Okay, thank you. Zoe Goodman.
Okay, I'm going to speak with Zoe. Rabbi Dee, there seems to be in the media and otherwise a lack of understanding really of the history of modern Israel. In fact, it's often misinformed completely. And even words like colonizers seem to be getting used. What do you think, how do you think that should be addressed? And do you think that's important to be addressed?
I think it's less important. I went on a peace trip actually in about 11 years ago with the Methodist Church, because they were threatening to boycott Israel. So they sent 2 rabbis and 4 or 5 priests to Bethlehem, Ramallah, Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv, 4-day trip. And we went around, and I tell you, it was fascinating. I can tell you about some of those meetings, but the one I want to mention is Rabbi Kiva Tzor, his name is. He was, at the time in the Foreign Office, he was the interfaith envoy or whatever it was, or contact for the Foreign Office. So we sat in the Foreign Office in Jerusalem, and it was Parshat Vayigash. And he's prepared a source sheet, just basically the first few verses of the Parsha, and passed them around, and we read them out in English. And it's the story of Yehuda, standing in front of Joseph, and when Benjamin has been discovered with the golden cup, and Joseph wants to take him as a prisoner, and he says, "Now you can leave." And he says to him, "If you take Benjamin, our father will die." And Rabbi Kiva said a very interesting, Rabbi Tor said a very interesting question. He said, what could Judah have said? Right? What would have been a normal response when his brother was discovered, with this planted cup in his bag? He said, it wasn't him, he didn't do it, he's a good boy, he hasn't got a criminal record, whatever. He could have said all these different things. That's what normal people would have said in defense. And he doesn't. He says, if you take him, my father will die. So Rabbi Tor said a brilliant point. He said, when it comes to conflict resolution, he said, it's not a good idea to go backwards and look at the history. He said, because we'll never agree. Because had he said that, so Joseph would say, well, he did have it, and that's my truth is that, he stole it. And your truth is he didn't steal it, but, and you're not going to get anywhere. So there's no point in arguing about it. He said, what you can argue about, though, is what's going to be in the future. So, if he says, my father will die if he doesn't, there's nothing Joseph can say. He has to agree. I mean, he doesn't know. So that, I think, if we want to actually, we can argue the facts and we can look clever. But if we actually want to resolve anything, we have to talk about what the future is. And I think it's more challenging, but I think that's much more productive.
Felix Mara. You're on mute, Felix. Felix, you're still on mute. Okay, fine. Right, well, there's no more questions. I don't see any further questions. It just remains to me in a minute. I'm just going to ask Lawrence Julius, our Vice Chairman, to propose a vote of thanks.
Well, Felix, I think, has just put himself off mute.
All right, Felix.
I thought I was at the back of a very long queue. So yes, I like what you said about us sort of getting involved in the war of ideas and words, and I find it very frustrating watching that whole process. I mean, I'd sign up for the IDF tomorrow or right now. I'm 66 years old, so I don't think that's actually a possibility. It just occurred to me one thing we could perhaps be one sort of string to our bow, or if we're going to put it, might be a sense of humor. And historically, that has been a very powerful weapon against some of the people we're dealing with. Of course, the last, well, not just the last four weeks, but the last few years, it has not been a laugh a minute. But when I look at the sort of crass sentimentality of a lot of Palestine's apologists, and the sort of I think maybe a dark sense of humor would perhaps sometimes that would really be something we could contrast with this idiocy. I see.
Okay, Rabbi Dee.
Yeah, anyone who's on my Facebook page or group, whatever, you could. There's one particular video which I think is hysterical, which is an English guy. I don't know if he's Jewish. He may be Jewish, maybe not. And I know he's a comedian. But when the hospital was bombed, he made a video which maybe some of you already seen, where he said, granted that Hamas have shown themselves to be great sort of moral, upstanding individuals that behead babies and rape women. But even given their upstandingness and their sort of likelihood to be, tell the truth, he said the fact that they could count 500 casualties within 1 minute and be accepted as truth by BBC, was really incredible, with all the fireball and all the thing that it took Israel, days to work out how many casualties they've had, and within 1 minute they counted 500 exactly, and it was presented as truth, and I thought that was quite amusing. So when that happened, I spoke to my contacts in Israel, in the sort of Hasbara, whatever, the sort of PR. And I said to them, Jewish humor actually has a big role to play, because why did Jewish humor come about? I said, let me suggest it came about because we were being persecuted by non-Jews, and we wanted to get that message across to them. But no one was that interested, to tell our story, because it wasn't that interesting if they were persecuting us. But if they made a joke of it, then actually the non-Jews might even tell the joke if it was self-deprecating, and then it would spread. And actually people would, tell the joke, but they'd also have an understanding of the suffering that we were going through. So it was a way of basically making a viral post, was to make a joke. So I said, we need to get comedians involved in this campaign.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But just to follow up on what you said about it being safer to weigh in the war of words, of course, that is not necessarily going to be a safe thing to do. But I'm not too bothered about that.
Okay, the last question, and then we will close. Keith Melrose.
It's actually his wife Anne, but
You're equally welcome.
It's not really a question. I just wish to express to anyone to say that please do not generalize by saying that British people are anti-Israel. There are many Christians in this land, thank God, who are very pro-Israel and love the Jewish people. And we will continue to stand with Israel and are hugely grateful to the Jewish people. So I pray your blessing on you, and I pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Thank you.
Man, thank you. I want to add one thing, just I think Marian's point about what the slogan should be. Can I send that to you as a group? Maybe you could brainstorm it together. You could have some ideas.
Yes, please. It's a great idea.
Come up with a slogan, and whatever it is, share it with your other friends and try and get other people's ideas. See if you can come up with a slogan for these marches for Israel, because I do think they need it. I mean, I think, and that could be an interesting time. I want to end with one idea that when I went to a psychologist for a while when we had our tragedy, and he told me something very interesting, which he said to me. He said, "You're suffering two separate parallel issues." So I said, "Okay, what are they?" So he said, number one, he said, "You're suffering because you have time spare when you come home at night. Your wife isn't there and your kids are not there, and you pick up the telephone, they're not there. So the time that you would normally spend with them is free, and every time you encounter that time slot, you miss them and you feel the pain." And that's one issue. He said, number two is when you think about them, you feel sad because you have all the memories, and you feel sad because of the memories. So those are two things. And I realized that one of the things that I was doing was because of, I know people just were contacting me, and we had a lot of people who came to the Shiva and afterwards contacted me. I was drawn into a number of different projects, and each of the projects was connected in some way to one of the girls and their personalities. And it helped me in two ways. Because number one, by being busy, by doing the stuff I was doing, it meant I didn't have too many time slots where I was thinking about what I should be doing. And number two, when I thought about Lucy and Maia and Rina, when I think about them, I think about them in the context of the things that I'm doing, which I feel are quite positive. So I feel like they've inspired me to do something, and I feel happy when I think about them and not just sad. So I have moments where I feel sad, but often I feel happy when I'm thinking about them as well. And I think that we've all been through this group trauma of what happened on Simchat Torah, and the best way for us to deal with it is to take upon ourselves something, a project, whether that is coming up with a slogan, whether it's making some posts, or whether it's helping Israel in some way or other. And Felix says he's too old to go into the army, but you know what? I'm just recruiting you all to the Israeli army. Okay, you're in the media division, and you're not too old. You're exactly the right age with the right language and the right life experience to come up with the right messages, and we need you. So take upon yourself a project that will help you in two ways. Number one, you'll spend less time looking at all the depressing news and the BBC and all these different things which are depressing you. And number two, when you think about what happened on Simchat Torah on the 7th of October, you'll think about them at some point, about how they inspired you to do something great. So I really think that is the opportunity here. Please join the war effort. Please join the IDF. You are now the British media division, and we need your help. And as much as Israel is failing to get their message out in England, you are now empowered to be that voice for Israel. And honestly, we need you. The people who might have been doing this type of thing in Israel, A, don't have very good English skills, and even if they were around, and B, are now being called up on the front line, so they're not even available. So we are completely running without any support in Israel, and every single one of you is now, the PR division and performing a very important role. So please take that seriously. Dedicate a few hours. I think 1-2 hours a day, really, or and per week, a number of hours. Do something. Choose what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how you're going to communicate it, and really be the voice for Israel, please, because we absolutely need you.
Thank you. In a moment, I'm going to ask Lawrence Julius, our Vice Chairman, to propose a vote of thanks. Before I do, I want to remind you all, we have 2 more events next week. Firstly, on Monday evening, we have Alison Pearson, who's a very well-known Daily Telegraph reporter, who was one of the founders of the October Declaration and British Friends of Israel, which has got 200 relatively famous people who've all signed a declaration supporting Israel. So I do hope you will all come to hear Alison on Monday night. And then on Thursday night, slightly more looking to the future, what's going to happen to Gaza after Israel has won the war? And Natasha Hausdorff, the famous lawyer, is going to chair a discussion on that. Lawrence, over to you.
Right. Rabbi Dee, on behalf of everyone at the NJA, I would like to thank you for your thought-provoking talk tonight. We will feel for you and for everyone in Israel. We would love Israel to take some form of sanction against the BBC and its journalists. The BBC is by far the world's most influential media channel, and yet it just constantly distributes false news and virtually at times becoming blood libels. And the journalists have no sanction at all. So if the authorities in Israel could put some price on the BBC journalists, that they understand that it's not free to make those libels, that is my ask to you tonight. I have contacted every MK at the Knesset and asked them to do that. I would just like to thank you again. I'm Yisrael Hai and hope to see you in better times. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Dee, and thank you everybody for coming this evening. And I hope to see you all